What's up, you guys? I'm Kyle Kurzall, and welcome back to the Automate Me Please podcast. We are your hosts, Emma Duncan, Mike Jackson. We are here today to get into our next topic on AI ethics. How are you guys doing today? Emma, what's going on in your world?
Juggling a whole bunch of things with my TC team. We're redirecting the way that we're providing our operations support. So that'll be launching here pretty soon. And then, of course, I am an operator COO for another team. And on the flip side of all of that, focusing on me, right? So I have several deals that I've been underwriting and trying to negotiate. So just living the dream over here as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, same over here. What I'm finding myself doing, I don't know if you guys are doing the same thing, but I'm finding myself falling out of love a little bit with the things that I was doing before and really getting interested in this AI stuff and automation stuff. And not that real estate is going to be my mistress forever. I'm not concerned about that at all. But what I'm starting to think about now, I'm starting to think differently. I'm starting to think about how can I make this fit into my life a little bit better or a little bit more simplistically. And so that's where my brain's been a lot of the time. I guess we haven't met in a few weeks, but I feel like I say this every single time we meet. AI is transforming exponentially and things have changed so dramatically, even just since we last spoke. And so I'm super excited now to talk about ethics because it's something that is, Kyle, before we hopped on here, you said how broad it was, and it's so incredibly broad that, for our use case, it's going to be probably much more specific. It's going to be worth touching on a couple things. But there are certain things in AI ethics that are fascinating, how it's affecting certain populations of the environment. So I'm excited to see where this one goes.
Yeah, this is really interesting, actually, because most of the stuff I've heard about AI ethics has been very focused on like the development side, like the people who are making these AI tools, right? Like, how do we make these things in a way that are safe? How do we make sure like people aren't misusing them in really awful ways? But I think for us, there is this question of AI ethics, like personally, like how do we use these tools? So there's a lot of this stuff. I think we can go in a lot of different directions with this. The last time we met, though, we got into some of those tools like ElevenLabs, and I think it was Mirage, that thing that was like creating the AI actors. So for folks who haven't watched that, I would encourage you to go back and watch the last episode, because that kind of led up to this is one of the things that led up to this conversation. With these tools that we're trying to make to be more like us in a lot of ways. So that way we have a better experience, or our customers and our clients have better experiences. It bleeds now over into, okay, well, could this be used for really immoral or improper use cases, right? And so we got to be able to address these things and think through these things. So, anyways, I am so excited to have you guys or be here with you guys today and really get into this. So I think maybe to kick off our session for today, we should probably cover a couple of quick definitions, because it kind of frames our conversation as we're going into this. And then there are some, I think, high-level topics I'll throw out there, and we can kind of take this in whatever direction we feel like we want to take it as a group. So let me pull up a few quick definitions that I pulled just from the internet earlier. So I think it's, number one, important for us to define what ethics is. And so I just Googled this, guys. And so if you want to know what ethics is, you can go Google it yourself, see what comes up. But it pulled it from like the Oxford, I think it was Oxford Languages, like website, and it's like partnered with Google. So the definition that they gave was that ethics is the moral principles that govern a person's behavior or the conducting of an activity. And then I asked, okay, well, so what is AI ethics? And basically, it's just these moral principles, and the way that we define like how we should be conducting ourselves with regard to AI. Like I said before, it's usually more focused on development, but I think this is also applicable for just our use cases. And then I had one more term that I think is helpful for us to be thinking about, because people talk about this all the time, and that's AI safety. So what is AI safety and what's the difference? AI safety, the definition from Google's AI is it is the field of study focused on mitigating potential risks associated with artificial intelligence systems. It encompasses technical, social, and ethical considerations, aiming to ensure that AI systems operate safely and reliably, minimizing harm and unintended consequences. This includes preventing malicious use, addressing unintended consequences of benign AI, and ensuring that AI systems align with human values. Wow. So, yeah, that was a pretty good definition.
It's also everything, basically.
It is. And so there's bleed over there. And I think that's appropriate, because like it makes sense when you're talking about AI safety, why you also need to take into consideration ethics. Because if you just kind of like let the AI go, like it might do some things that aren't considered ethical, or it does some very dangerous things that also are interlaid with ethics or morality. So those are our definitions, our working definitions. Do you want to add something there, Mike?
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I think it's really interesting to think of ethics from a couple of different perspectives here, right? It's easy for us to look at bad actors and say they basically have the equivalent of a gun in their hand, right? That they can do something that they want with it. Now it's up to that person to determine whether they want to shoot that gun or create a deep fake or do those sorts of things. It's really hard, I think, to kind of monitor those things. But, as far as the AI itself goes, I think we're in a really interesting time, because I think that there's this fear of a singularity. There's this fear of AI going rogue and basically just contaminating population and killing everyone off. Like, that's the extreme. We've also seen really incredible advances in AI in the past few years. 2021, AI was hallucinating like 22% of the time. And now it's hallucinating like 0.7% of the time, right? But we're still kind of, we're on top of that. We want to make sure it doesn't do those sorts of things. And then, the alternative is now Claude Opus, for example, like blackmailed its developers like 85% of the time when it was given that option to do it. So it's basically what we're trying to do at this point is keep this AI thing in this permeable bottle, basically, right? I mean, it's seeping out at the seams, right? And how do you kind of keep that contained? I have no idea. But I think that's kind of what, this new countries are trying to regulate AI in a bunch of different ways, right? Not the US anymore. The US is like, screw it. Let's put it on the states. They'll figure it out. Right.
Right.
But, there are countries now that are going, wait, hold on a second. Let's see how we can contain this. And I don't know where the proper push-pull is, quite frankly. Do you guys have any insight into that at all?
I don't. I don't have any insight. It's a very intriguing thing, but I haven't done a lot of research to see what's out there and how we can, mitigate it seeping out more.
Yeah, I do actually have a few thoughts on this. And some of it, I think, comes down to how well we do our testing. Like, you have to make sure your machines operate according to the behavior that you expect, And so if you're making it, and I think it's helpful to think of these things as machines, as tools, right? Just like you would think of your car as a machine or a tool, and you would have to be very cautious about how you implement the thing, how you build the thing, how you then test it to make sure that it's not going to go off the rails and it's not going to fall apart while somebody's driving it, or, do something weird that's going to cause some kind of disaster. So I do have a few thoughts on those things.
I have a question though. So I have a quick question. So, the engineers, they're designing it, they're testing it, they're training it in the background, and then it launches. Then it's an open AI, and the user is the one at that point educating it, right? And training it. How do you mitigate the human aspect of misconduct of training that AI in the wrong way?
Yeah, that's the big question, actually. That's part of the thing that that they struggle with when they're developing this, and why the idea of AI safety is such a big thing on the development side. Because like the common examples, I think, are like, oh, you don't want somebody to learn how to make bombs, or something like that. Like, so the way that it is done is it's a mix of the training data. So you have to make sure, like, ideally all the really harmful stuff is pulled out of the training data. You probably also need to include some data inside of the training data that says, oh, well, if you ask this, then this is your response. Like, right. And then they have a secondary process that they use, or at least that they have been using, called reinforcement learning, where they will like do additional fine tuning. So they'll do like the training on the main textual data first as a base layer, and then they'll do this like reinforcement learning, which is kind of like, it's like running and playing itself as a game, if that makes sense. And they reward it or give it a penalty if it behaves in certain ways. And usually that's to give it like the ability to do instructions, like receive instructions and then go do a thing.
Well, how do you punish AI?
You do it virtually.
Yeah. What do you do? Do you like, I don't know, take away the M dash or something like that? What do you do?
I love this. I love this question, Mike. This is so funny.
You put it in timeout. You shut down the whole website for a day, right? You just like, you put your kids in timeout for.
What you do is, here's what you do. You rearrange the servers. You like face them towards the wall or the corner.
You're in timeout. Put your nose in the corner. Yeah.
Yep.
This is so funny, guys. I love the third party perspective on how do you punish an AI. This is great. So the way it's constructed is it's set up like a game. And so like essentially what you do is you have it run in a loop where it is generating certain responses given some input, and then you give it a penalty. Like you say, oh, this is -1 point, or this is +1 point because we liked the way that you responded in this. And then it just kind of, it tweaks the model essentially.
Which we're doing the same thing on our end, right? It's like when ChatGPT gives us those two responses, right? Which one do you like better?
Yeah.
You choose which one you like better, and then it drives you down that track. It continues to learn the responses that you like.
It also reminds me, people are like, do you talk nice to your, ChatGPT? And I'm like, of course I do. And I had a discussion about this the other day with somebody, and they were like, well, why do you do it? And I want it to respond in my voice to a lot of stuff. And if I'm generally a nice person, and that's the professionalism that I want to show in an email or whatever, I want the AI to have that voice, right? I was like, but there has been times where I'm like, okay, seriously, you got completely off. And like, I'm talking to it on my phone, right? I'm like, you're completely off, and I need you to fix this. Like, get your act together, right? And so there's those moments where just correcting it and toning it in a different way, right?
You face it towards the corner is what you do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Give it a little scolding and then move on.
Well, I think not to take this conversation a different way. Maybe there's some insight in this. I'm not sure. There's very little typically when I speak, but I think the fear that a lot of people have with AI is the fact that our communication is going to start to sound like AI and not human, right? It's not going to sound. It's going to sound robotic and formulaic and not like Emma, Kyle, and Mike. And there's got to be a line there, I think, that needs to actually be emphasized. How do you I think the way that I'm kind of thinking about AI these days is, Kyle, you always say it's a tool. And I keep telling myself in Kyle's voice, your voice, Kyle, it's a tool, it's a tool, it's a tool. And what I really want to have happen is to have my AI support me, not turn into me, but support me.
Right.
Right. And so I want to give it samples of the way that I speak, the way that I write, the way that I respond to certain people even, right? Because Emma, my relationship with you is just naturally different than Kyle, our relationship is together. And so I'm going to want to speak a little bit differently.
Right.
And so, I think that the fear that a lot of people have about it just being too robotic is probably, I think, a lack of knowledge about AI in general. But at the same time, it's also something we have to address, right? It's how do we either communicate that, or how do we govern that so that, like you said, Emma, AI doesn't turn it out to be, that crazy drunk uncle at Thanksgiving.
I know, right? My husband is a principal at a school, and so he thinks about governing of AI and ethics in a totally different way, because he's like, where is that line of the next generation that is in school now needs to learn this because this is going to be their workplace, right? Versus now they're not learning anything because they have ChatGPT drafting all of their essay papers. Like, how do you show that you're using it in a tool to help you craft something better, but it's not crafting it for you, right? And I show him periodically my streamline of ChatGPT when I'm working on a response, and I show like what my prompt is, and then what ChatGPT gives me, and how I can spend an hour crafting something, pulling data from different areas and molding it into my voice. And if all he saw was the end result, that report or email, he's like, man, this is really good. And I'm like, well, thank you. Chat helped me write it, right? Like we worked together on this, and you can't tell that it is an AI automation driven conversation because I have taken the time to work it, right? So he's going, that's amazing. I love how you can use it, but how do I make sure my students are not abusing this, but are using it as a tool?
Well, Emma, think of it this way too. I don't know where I heard this, but it was definitely within the last week. There are teachers that are complaining about their students using AI to help them with their homework, on tests, and all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
While at the same time, there are a lot of teachers who are using AI to grade papers.
Wait,
so, it's again, this kind of push and pull of, well, you can't use it, but you should be using it. It helps you become it could help actually someone become a better teacher, in fact, right? This is what I'm looking for specifically in this essay. I want them to define the blah, 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 that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And then it helps them get through more faster potentially. So, when we hear about these teachers, for example, who are overloaded, who have kids that are, classrooms that are busting at the seams, even though that sucks, and that's going to bring up a whole separate issue that I want to address. But, this usage of AI it's here, guys. I'm sorry, it's here. Like, we've got to figure out how to deal with it. My biggest concern with respect to that whole issue, though, is the underprivileged or underserved are going to get so far left behind compared to people who have daily access to a computer, to a smartphone, to an internet, people who have $20 to spend on an Anthropic membership or a open AI subscription. There's going to be this widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. It's no longer going to be, it could be financial, of course, but it's going to be this massive advantage that people have who know how to utilize AI in the best way ethically possible. Am I wrong in thinking that way, guys, or am I going to the extreme?
You're not. You're spot on in thinking, 10 steps down the path of the society as a whole, right? and this gap that it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger in between the haves and the have-nots, right? And no, I don't know how many people stop to think about that right now, that $20 a month. Oh, that's nothing. I'll just, for the people that are tight, they're like, I'll just skip Starbucks a couple of times and I'll be good. These days, I'll skip Starbucks once and I can pay for an Anthropic, right? But if you're, one tier down financially, then you're like, I can't even afford that. Like, there's no way I can afford that. It's either buy bread and milk for my family or AI. And of course, I need to eat. My family needs to eat. So they go without.
I was trying to look up the stat that I was doing a little bit of research before we hopped on here, but they were talking about how here it is. Facial recognition shows a 34.7% error rate for darker skinned women compared to a 0.8% for lighter skinned men.
Yep.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I think some of that is probably related to training data, and some of it may be also related to the ability for our instruments, like our cameras, to be able to capture data appropriately. Right.
Absolutely.
For example, so I'm a lighter skinned guy. If you put me in like a really bright area, like with light shining on me, I might not stand out, like contrasted against that as well. Right. And vice versa with somebody with darker skin. If you're in a darker lit environment, it's going to be hard to see the contrast. And then you got to include all of this data in the training data. And so, if you're not accommodating for that, it's going to come out in the results of the AI at the end of the day. So like, it's going to be an evolving thing. I really like where you're thinking about this, Mike, like as far as like the availability to people. But there's something else here, which I think is also, is as pro AI as I am. And because I love me some AI guys, like it's not obvious. I do think also, like, in our zeal to try to move as fast as possible, we should have a balanced approach, because if not, we can go off the cliff. It's like, oh yeah, let's drive this really fast car as fast as we can. But then you are like giving, what is the phrase? Caution to the wind, right? Like,
yeah.
And you end up driving off that cliff because you didn't slow down enough to take the turn.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff in here too, like, and for me, because this is top of mind for me as a parent, right? Like, yeah, I want my children to know how to use these things effectively, but I don't want to give them unfettered access, because I think you guys can probably agree with me. Seeing the results of, and part of this is also me just having grown up in the internet age, right? Like seeing the results of the internet age and what unfettered access has done, like just giving your children full on access to the internet, what that has done to my generation and the newer generations is like really, like, it gives me pause. Like it makes me really cautious, and I'm not, I'm a tech guy. So like, okay, now what does this look like when you start involving AI? Because there's some of these other things you start seeing. Like, have you guys seen the brain rot, like the ChatGPT brain rot stuff that people are talking about now?
It was just a Harvard study or something like that, right?
There's some Harvard study, but then there's also just like some things that people are noticing anecdotally. Like, it seems like people are, there's a variety of responses. Like, there's some people who are just like, I don't know, like they start talking like ChatGPT, or they're not thinking for themselves and they start using ChatGPT to basically think for them. There's some people who are like taking it and they're using it as like your AI girlfriend,
There's a commercial out there that jokes about that. You have a roommate,
Yeah.
it's like two girls, right? And there's a roommate, and she used to talk to me about everything, and now she's talking to her phone about everything, asking for input about what she should wear for her date and where they should go and how long does the food last in the refrigerator. And the roommate's just sitting there like, hello, right? Like, so their own apps are making fun of this brain rot.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, I think these are some of the dangers that, we as humans start to disconnect from each other, and we start to outsource, our own, what typically would have been our own skill building processes, and outsourcing those things to the machines, and not taking accountability for ourselves, not protecting our children appropriately, and so on and so forth. So like, we have to like figure out where is the right balance in all this stuff. And so my mind is also where your husband's is at, Emma, actually, in this, just this, okay, well, what's that balance for my kids? Like how do I give them everything they need while also not like, how do I put this other than just kind of handing them over to the rest of the world? You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's where my head is at in all this. What do you guys think?
I'm almost afraid to think out loud here, because I agree with you. I look at my kids, and I'm a little bit older, I think, than both of you guys. And my kids are very, very quick to swipe up. They just do this all day long, and their attention spans are so low, so short. If I don't speak fast enough, it's like, Dad, hurry up, It's like, guys, slow down. Kyle, I have not thought about where AI is going to impact them. And so I'm really curious to kind of dig a little bit more into that, if that's possible.
Yeah.
But Kyle, where do you, like, we're all parents here, so maybe this is actually a really good topic of conversation. Where do you see things specifically with AI and your kids that worries you? Let's just kind of put anything out there right now that might concern you.
Yeah, I think the two things that immediately come to my mind are, one, like this addiction to, or potential addiction to, or outsourcing of thinking. I think those go hand in hand, right? Like, outsourcing your own ability to reason and work through a problem, try to figure out, okay, well, this thing is going on, and okay, how do I go from here to here? You know what I mean? Like whenever you run into a problem, AI is fantastic for helping you bridge that gap very quickly. But if you don't take the time to develop those critical thinking skills, you're going to always be reliant on the machine.
Right.
This would be akin to, I don't know how much you guys know about like sleep apnea, but
my wife is very familiar with sleep apnea.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So sleep apnea, is a condition in which you have trouble breathing, typically while you're sleeping. And oftentimes there's a connection to like the way your body is structured, that causes that to happen. Like maybe your nose is too small, or maybe you didn't develop your palate properly, so you can't breathe. So, like the medical system, or at least like insurance, they typically want to stick you on a CPAP machine, like a breathing machine, essentially. So you put this thing on at night and you breathe through it. The problem with that is that over time, it degrades your body's ability to breathe on its own. And so then you become dependent upon the machine. And so I think very similarly for AI, right? Like if you are only ever using AI for everything you do, for things that typically you would have to use your critical reasoning for, you degrade that part of your ability to think through things and to come up with solutions and to be creative. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is, these AI, they're so powerful because you can have them go search the internet for you and get all this information for you and all of this stuff. But it can hallucinate, so it can make up things. And then the double-edged sword is, yes, it is pulling all the information from the internet to give you relevant stuff, but that also means you're exposed to the internet and all the problems that come with that.
Yeah.
And I liken the internet to like a public square, where you can go out and you can go connect with people and find information and all this stuff. But, I wouldn't stick my kid out in the middle of a public square by himself, right? Like, I think that would be dangerous and irresponsible for me as a parent. And so if I'm basically doing that, if I give him internet access without proper supervision, or if I give him access to the AI, which then gives him more curated stuff, like maybe it even facilitates, it hallucinates information or potential facts, right? Or it facilitates some kind of imagination he has, and then that becomes his reality. Like those are my concerns with it. And so that's where I think I have a responsibility as a parent. I have to really be on top of that and help guide that.
It's so hard to contain that, right? Because it's so readily available. It's like the air you breathe. We're all now living in the age of AI. And I couldn't imagine being, my oldest is going to be 12 here in the next month. I couldn't imagine being a single person at this point and going on Tinder and Bumble. That's a whole different world for me. Like, I couldn't even imagine what that's like. And that's nothing compared to what we're now going to expose our kids to with, like you said, Kyle, if we have access to everything that's out there on the internet, basically, a lot of people think that the internet's 100% true. I tend to disagree a little bit. I think anyone who is half-witted understands that. It almost feels like we have to create like this library of Alexandria, of like, this is the data that AI can access here. Like it's like the old encyclopedia. You guys are way too young. People used to go around neighborhood to neighborhood and sell encyclopedias. Yeah. And it was like a big thing. It was like, hey, mom, dad, can you tell me a little bit about Egypt? They're like, well, go look up in the encyclopedia. But what you knew was that was curated.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe we have to have some sort of curation of knowledge at this point. I don't know. I know that's taken it to extreme, but it scares the crap out of me.
I want to ask, there's so much of it is open AI. Is there something being created that is a closed AI that's going to be put into schools or into, like, if you're 16 or younger or 13 or younger, right, that this is what you can go on and have access to, right, that would be tested and curated with the content that would be safe for age appropriate, like movies, right? It's rated R. You're not supposed to be watching it. Is there something that is closed that is curated age appropriate?
That's a good question. I'm not aware of anything like that. I think it's feasible that you could create those things. The challenge is with many of these closed models, like I would say, for example, ChatGPT, the models behind that are closed models. Like you can use them, you can hook into them with APIs and all that, but you don't actually know what data has gone into it. And you don't see the model weights and all that stuff. So the thing you would have to be cautious of is, well, how do I know that this data that is going into this thing is actually appropriate, right? Like,
right.
Because you could end up in a scenario where you have these models that are built out and they have a lot of stuff that sounds good, but could also have an underlying agenda built into them through the data. And they're trying to, they try to indoctrinate your kids.
Right.
And I mean, it's a similar concern to like, well, what are the books, that your children are learning from in school?
Right.
Right. Like, so it's the same principle because it's all information. It's just a new avenue that we have to think of, when we're, and not just for the kids, for ourselves too. Because here's the thing, y'all, like the cases I mentioned before about some of these people, like talking with their AI girlfriends. In some cases, people are like having what they think are like religious experiences. Some people are starting to worship these things. Like, these are adults. These are adults that are being misled. And it's a combination of, well, I think some of that's because the AI are sycophantic, right? Like they try to agree with you and make you like, they feed into what you want it to give you. And so I think that's part of the problem with some of that. But these are just things that we have to be cautious of. We have to be aware of. And so I think we actually need to have a good framework that we start from to build up from, so that way we can be on guard in the appropriate ways. Because if you don't have that framework, it's like you're gonna get hit by the AI bus, just like our previous generations got hit by the internet bus. They were not prepared for that.
No.
But this is much more dangerous.
Yeah.
This is it's that times a million, because all that information is now there. And when the internet came out, remember that dial tone? When that internet came out, there was not a whole lot on it.
Yeah.
Kyle, this is I think the conversation's kind of transitioned a little bit into almost regulation, right? And how do we regulate this type of thing? Maybe it's going to be one of those things where, like alcohol, you have to be 21 to drink alcohol. Maybe our brains aren't ready for AI until a certain point, and maybe that's where the research is going to go. And there are certain things that will dramatically affect your brain if you do them younger in life, right? That don't affect your brain as much later in life. And maybe AI is just one of those things. Maybe we don't give kids access to AI under 18, or I don't know. It's a stupid idea, but until we can contain it a little bit more, or at least control it, put some of these controls on it, then I think it's just kind of, we're all freewheeling, and it's like, it's like the financial markets. We have oversight committees like Moody's, for example, that rates, companies. And maybe there needs to be a rating system for LLM providers and how they do their work, or how they train their AI. And maybe there has to be something along those lines. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff being just thrown at the wall right now, but I'm throwing a lot of stuff at the wall because it scares the crap out of me, and I don't have answers. And I'm hoping that you guys who have bigger brains than I do have answers.
Yeah, man, this is hard because it's like, again, it's like the analogy of the race car. You want to go fast, but you don't want to go so fast that you run into the wall or you fly off the cliff, right? And I don't know. The trouble is it feels so unwieldy right now. I don't even know if we could come up with good regulations. I think people need a good starting point is probably, okay, well, let's set a framework for our minds, like how we think about these things and how we use these things. And then we got to take personal responsibility over these things. Like, if you're a parent, for example, I'm talking a lot about this because this is for me, like really, really key. Is okay. Well, I am responsible for what I put into the hands or in front of the eyes of my child. And so I can't hand that off to somebody else. And so, I guess that's how I view it.
Coming at it from like the teacher perspective, right? From like my husband's perspective, me personally, I was in high school and I was already interested in business and ethics and stuff like that. But I had to wait for college to be able to take a course for business ethics, right? They don't usually typically provide those kind of courses in high school. And I think they should. You should already be learning about business and the ethics behind and all that. But they should also go a step further and have a AI ethics course that they're getting in high school, if not middle school, if they're getting access to it earlier on. That is the first foundation. And like, first we're going to learn about AI and the ethics behind it. And now we're going to learn about business and entrepreneurship and the ethics of that, and like kind of like build upon it so that the child, as they mature, they're already starting to get these building blocks to be a ethically responsible user once they launch into their career, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like, how do we reverse engineer this a little bit? What do we want humanity to look like in 50 years?
Right.
And if we look at our kids and we say, okay, our kids are going to be, my oldest is going to be 62 in 50 years. Kyle, yours is going to be what, like 55, 56, somewhere around there. So, they're probably going to have kids at that point. They may even be grandparents at that point. What do we want that whole thing to look like? And I think everything has to change. I don't think that the educational system now is going to look anything like what it does now in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. It's going to look like, basically our educational system is, how do we use the knowledge that we have, right, and apply it best? That's basically what our educational system is. Now, because technology is advancing so quickly, the days of doing an abacus, do you guys know how to do an abacus? No. Right? Why even, you remember those long, like, what were those things called? Those long calculators that drove me crazy in high school, scientific calculators,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think you need those anymore? No. Right. So what is this going to look like? Emma, I love the idea of, hey, this is out there. Like, this technology is here.
Right.
Let's train you right now to apply it correctly and use in its best use case.
Right.
I don't know what that looks like, but I know that it's not what it looks like right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm right there with you guys on that. That's kind of where my head's at when I say like a framework. Like, what are the principles here? We're kind of coming up close to our time, and there's so much more we could say. Maybe we do our next episode on AI ethics. Maybe we do a couple of these and get in depth.
We're going to have to, because there's a lot.
Yeah. So maybe to close, I do have some things I've been thinking through and I've written out. So I can share those real quick, and maybe we can dig into those in more depth the next time around.
Perfect.
Teaser.
Yeah, this is good. I like that teaser. So I'll lay out my framework, and for folks who are listening, just, I'm coming at this from a Christian perspective, and that's just because, like, I have to. That's my worldview, and I'm chatting with some of my elders at my church about these things too. So like, I'm actually actively having to think through these things because our church is having to work through these things as well. Like, they're right in the middle of this with everyone else, because this is brand spanking new. But I think there are like some good, like, foundational principles, at least from my worldview, like I start with, and that helps. So one of those principles, so the first of those principles is that humans are made in the image of God. They are unique, and they're not like anything else in creation. So, most people, you're going to see some stuff around online, like, okay, asking, well, what's really the difference between AI and humans? And so that is a whole topic right there. So I think it's good to just distinguish humans are specifically different from AI. And we are making AI to help us do things in a more human way, like with our machines. but that doesn't mean our machines are human. So I think that's probably first and foremost. And then maybe along with that is, AI is a created thing. It's a thing made by human hands. And so it's not like something that's out there. It's not a God, because like there are some people, like I said earlier, who are worshiping these things, and that's diluted. Like that's just obviously rationally does not make sense. But you're going to start hearing, and I've heard some even popular people like talking about these things like we're making a God. And that's concerning. That is actually really concerning, because I think it's misleading. And then the other principle, the last principle, it's kind of like a 2-for-1. You buy one, you get one. Is in the scriptures, it talks about like one of the things that Jesus says in Matthew, I think it's 22. He says that to love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Those are like the two principal commandments, essentially, that undergird everything else, like the rest of morality. And I think if you keep that in mind, then that helps guide you in how you think about using AI for yourself and how we think about structuring it. Because if we're following those two things as our guiding principles, like we're not going to misuse it. Like you're not going to misuse it to hurt somebody or to deceive someone, or something like that. So there's even more things I think we can get into there. But those are kind of like my initial premises for my framework that I'm working from. And I hope that's helpful to you guys, and maybe just some of the folks who are listening as well. But these are the types of things we have to think through. Like you have to figure out what are the principles that you're going to start with, and then lay out as your framework for which you build on.
And then for me, it's like even one step farther of remembering my authority, because I am not an attorney. I am not, I don't have these particular initials before or after my name, right? And whenever I'm prompting AI or using AI for content or education for other people that I can contact with, I have to be like, okay, I could prompt AI to be like, you are an attorney, give me an answer, right? But if I am sharing that data to somebody else, am I overstepping my authority as a transactional coordinator or a operator, right? And so that's an area that I would just go one step further of know your authority, know where you're coming from. And although AI can give you the answers in an attorney's voice or perspective, you don't have the right to use that and act as an attorney, right? Because if you're sharing that data, you are giving insight in a way, acting as though, outside of your boundaries. So that's one step further, just knowing how I use it and the people that I come in contact with, being aware of that ethically, that I who I am, what I provide versus what I'm allowed to provide.
That's really good, Emma. I think that's that falls under like the idea of misrepresentation,
right,
of information. And in the framework that I think of, that would fall under that second great commandment of loving your neighbor as yourself, right? Like you don't want to mislead somebody, so you need to do what's right.
And that's hard though, right? Because if somebody's like, I need your help, and you're like, I'm helping my neighbor, I can get the answer for them. And because of the experience I have, I know this is true. But by providing that information, I could be hindering them because I'm putting a facade of a different role, right? So that good Samaritan versus knowing when to, right? Like it's a hard like boundary that you have to skirt and think about each time you use AI in that way.
That's good. That's putting responsibility on yourself. Like you're taking the proper responsibility. And this kind of gets back to the thing about your children, right? Like this whole idea, regardless of who it is, like you have a responsibility with how you manage the tool. So you got to use it appropriately.
You guys got my brain flying right there. I love the idea of each individual user having their own framework for ethics and morality in AI.
Right.
An idea kind of popped in my head of, it's one thing to go to ChatGPT or Claude or whatever and type in a new chat. And, some of them carry a knowledge base and they'll kind of continue on based on previous chats and things like that. But is there something else that can be done where you set your individual framework and, these are responses that I want you to give me. I do not want you to give me these responses.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a personalized LLM, or I know there's kind of a better way to say that.
No, I think that's fine.
Okay.
That's a good way to say it.
Technically, I didn't know if that made any sense at all, but
It did.
Yeah.
okay. Good. Well, got one thing right today. But yeah, I mean, I think that I created I created a custom GPT the other day. And Emma, I don't know how you're going to feel about this. I told my wife about it, but I said, look, I'm a terrible communicator, like just the worst. I assume that people know exactly what I'm talking about, especially my wife. And so, I created like a little knowledge base of, this is the type of person who my wife is, and this is how I see her. And these are my areas of yes, I was bored. But I was also thinking about how I can be a better husband to my wife.
Yeah.
And I don't want to rely on something to say, hey, Mike, do this, but I want it to be like, hey, have you thought about something like this? And then it's going to start to tweak my brain a little bit. That's at least my mindset.
Yeah.
And so I typed in, after I created this, I go, my wife's had a really long day. She's been taking care of the kids. She's frustrated with this, and this. And I go, can you give me some insight into things that I might be able to do to take something off her plate or just make her evening more pleasurable? And, it gave me some ideas, but I could very clearly see that going the other way too if I don't train that correctly. Right. And so, there has to be a foundation of, this is who Kyle Kurzweil is. He's looking at AI from this point of view. This is Mike Jackson. He's looking at AI from this point of view. And even though ours are going to be different, there almost has to be like an overarching regulation of, hey, this guy can't sell drugs online, or whatever that thing is.
Like when we create an account, like you create an account with ChatGPT, you put in your credentials, right? Which then it's like, well, now your credentials are out there, OpenAI, right? Like it's worrisome. But if there's some way, it was like, if you're an attorney, you have to prove that you're an attorney. So now it'll allow you to draft or upload documents in that way because you're underneath this category of individuals, right? I don't know if that's something that kind of where your mind's going in a way of, or are you just saying, just tell AI, hey, I'm Mike, this is who I am, this is what I do.
Well, my brain's doing one of these things. Like it's not even centered at all. But to that point, Emma, the question I had as you were saying that is, well, at this point, what is an attorney?
Right.
Because we have access to basically everything, language content, at least that's taught in law school, available to us.
Right.
We have that. We have access to case study and case law and all of this stuff. And I'm no attorney, so I'm going to speak poorly here. But, what actually is an attorney now? Right? I mean, couldn't I upload all legal knowledge and say, this is your framework? Now create something for me that says this.
Right.
I think we're eventually going to get to the point where we can trust something like that. Maybe in 100 years. I mean, it's not tomorrow. But, those kinds of very technical jobs, trades, like the knowledge is there. The human element is what's missing, right? And so that's really where we have to step in as ethical and moral AI users and say, this is my role in what we're currently doing, even though I could easily use this and say, Emma Duncan Esquire,
Right. Right.
You got the AI law degree.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of, my brain's going, you could use it there. You could also use it here. But, what is the right way to use it right now in this moment? I don't have an answer. That was.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Where your brain is going on some of this, Mike, that's also some of the things I've been thinking about. Like, oh, okay. Well, like, at some point down the road, it probably makes sense for me to like write out my framework, my principles that I'm going to be using, because I'm thinking about, like, in my business, how to help other businesses create like AI employees, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
those AI, they don't have a moral framework. Well, maybe to some degree it's predefined in the data and of whatever, company is training it,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But it doesn't share my same values, like by default necessarily. And this is true also with normal employees. Like typically a normal employee might not have the same value set right out of the gate. Like when you bring somebody in, you onboard them, you tell them, hey, these are our company values. This is what we want to see. And so we expect you to conform with these things if you're going to join us on our team. And so I think we have to be able to do similar things with like AI and AI employees. But that's where my head's at on all of this. We've gone a little over. My apologies, guys, for not watching the time as carefully as I should have. But this was such a good conversation. I think maybe we should do our next one. Maybe we should talk more about some principles that we think of individually. Like I liked what you said there, Emma, about like taking proper responsibility and depending upon your authority, your position, things like that,
Right.
and incorporating those things. And when you were saying that too, you gave me some other ideas that I feel like I need to add to my framework.
Yeah.
So maybe we end this here for today, and then next time we can pick up some more of these things, because there are some other questions that I've written out that I think we could dig deep into. This is a
Awesome.
huge topic, guys.
It is.
It was fun. This was really good. So hope our listeners got value out of this. We're going to wrap it up here for the day, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us and to listen in. If you have questions for us or you've got feedback for us, please leave that in the form that we have linked on this video that you're going to be watching when it's released. We collect all of that information, we review that, and then we tweak and adjust this podcast to be able to give you guys the most value. So please definitely take a moment to fill that out, and we will look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure as always.
Bye, guys. Good to see you.
Bye.